I'm set. Cool. Yeah, thanks. I hope you like the fish and chips and you're not completely tired. And there was just last week one pretty good comic, I'm not sure if you've seen that in your Twitter bubble or wherever, where like kind of the Sandman comes at 3 and just boom, ruins your day and you fall asleep on your desk. I have that as well. So cool. I want to talk to you about working backwards from the customer. And this is a new topic for like myself as like presenting this to an audience. I give trainings around that, or like help I help customers. I help coworkers in our company to learn this process. But that's usually something that is not talked about. Like externally, we talk about technical stuff, not so much about these kind of things. So welcome to my beta test. So hi again, I'm Thomas. My job title changed in the last week, so software development manager. I don't care, like kind of I can play and do whatever I want here. I'm working in the Amazon Development Center in Berlin. A startup that started through the acquisition of the startup I co-founded. I've been 5 people. By now we have an office for 450 developers. And I've been in different roles and worked for different teams there. And just last year, I created my latest team. It's called the Chocolate Factory. And we are split between Berlin, Seattle, and Palo Alto. And we are a typical Amazon team. And that means we are a 2-pizza team. We're looking for more pizzas and people. But the idea around this is a very Amazonian idea. So our company, if you would look into our phone tool, you see it's a gigantic tree. And every time a node reaches a size of, you can't feed them by 2 American pizzas in a lunch break if it needs to be, then you probably can split up. Right? You can split up along different kind of dimensions. You can split up by, I don't know, back-end, front-end if you want to, or like kind of a subset of your application, like an agent versus like kind of a distributed system. I don't know, whatever it is. But you split up, and this team then is responsible and has the full ownership around what they're doing, and they have a contract to all the other teams they're interacting with, which is pretty cool. And the goal for the newly founded team we launched with is we want to increase developers and designers' productivity and happiness inside our company. And we try to do that through different initiatives, working with the design organization, working with front-end developers across our company. So how do we share and work on ideas together? Or to put it different, how to align team members and goals to create a shared understanding and vision to actually achieve something meaningful, right? I start with something that you probably have seen and shouldn't be a big thing, but that a lot of people reply as a solution for this, and that's a user story. And a user story is a short, simple description of a feature told from the perspective of a customer who desires this new functionality or feature. And that usually comes in this or slightly different versions. So as a type of user, I want to some goals, so that's some reason. Someone smart on the internet said, like, why do we actually even do that? And these stories help to shift the focus from writing about the requirements and to create gigantic docs of what to do, in which order, and where the button needs to be, to kind of align team members and have a shared understanding about the thing they actually should create in autonomy and like kind of do it, right? And like, because in the end, I don't care about the details. I don't know the best solution to that problem. And like kind of simple example I made up for this talk is like a backup software. So I, as a power user, I want to specify which files or folders I want to exclude so that my backup drive space is used efficiently, right? Completely random idea. But I think that might work, right? So it's like after reading this, and if I imagine that discussing or showing that to my team in the context of the existing application, right, we probably pretty quickly come to a shared understanding, right? Like some sketches on the whiteboard and a little bit back and forth, a little bit estimating if you want to, and then you're done. But what about this one? Like slightly changed, right? As a photographer, I want to back up my photos so that they're safe. You know, that's a crap user story, sorry. But like, it is not concrete, it's too broad, it's too big, it really doesn't really, it's not kind of, I think you might be even talking about a new project there, right? Kind of, if your users are not the right ones before and different user, it's too big in my opinion, right? So I would question if that user story would help you to even start, like kind of, is it even a good starting point for a conversation to have? I think that's not a good artifact to start a meaningful conversation for something that's like a little bigger than, wait a minute, we need a toggle here and a little bit of settings there. If that is bigger, I think that does not work. And what teams do is kind of, they then create epics and they split that up in smaller user stories and whatnot. That's very tricky for me. And I think, like me personally, right, that's me, I think user stories just work for small scale problems. And the size of a well-defined problem is limited by the complexity achievable in a single sentence. If you're German, or if you were forced to read Thomas Mann for some reason, that guy could write a full sentence over multiple pages. That's still the same sentence. That is an art and it's stupid, but it's like all of it, but it's not helping, right? By making it longer, more complex sentences, you're not solving the problem. And also, don't get me wrong, there is sentences that are very powerful and they describe a very strong and big idea, right? And this big idea can fit in a single sentence, right? Example would be this one, for example. I like that a lot. Let you read it. It's actually 2 sentences. But like, what do I do with that? It's a powerful sentence, right? But then again, like, so how do you do it, or how do we do that? How do I align teams and big projects to create a shared understanding and vision in our company? Like, a little bit back to our company again. So I talked about the 2 pizza teams. So imagine small teams. On the other side, I joined the company in 2012 through the acquisition of the startup I co-founded, and I was scared. I felt like, I'm not sure if that's the right move. I was like, I looked at Wikipedia, like kind of Amazon, like what do you do? Research, right? And it said it has 100,000 employees at that point in time, and I kind of, we will be crushed. Like we will like kind of tiny dots somewhere, not being able to move, but like, I don't know. The cool thing is my co-founder actually worked for Amazon before as an intern, and he's like, believe me, it's very different. Don't worry. I'm like, but I do, and like whatever, and we did it. And I'm really happy. The cool thing is, because the 2 pizza teams, right, they're autonomous, they're fast, they can do whatever they want, right, as fast as they can. And today, I looked up at Wikipedia again. Wikipedia says we have more than 230,000 employees nowadays. No difference for me. Like kind of for me, like kind of working in that company feels the same. It's ridiculous. I don't know, but that's the case. And why is that? Like kind of again, from my perspective, I think there's one crucial thing about Amazon. It's the customer obsession. So everything we do starts with our customers. Roughly 90 to 95% of our roadmap are defined by our customers. And we are in the game for a long-term thing, right? We're not there for, oh, let's rip people off here or do something short quickly here. It's not working, we scrap it again. That's not in our company culture. We try to build relationships with our customers that outlast us all. And so we have that gigantic tree of independent teams building stuff and being full force and being allowed to pick their tools they want to use and their technologies and even pick their problem. Like kind of my last project again, I picked the problem I want to solve, and leadership said, yeah, Thomas, go ahead, do it. Like kind of hire some people, do it. And this is unique to this company, like, or not, maybe not unique, but like it's a very important part of our company is that we hire inventors and pioneers, and then we try to hire builders, people that want to do something. And like, if I look at the company, and I just also obviously don't see what we're doing in a lot of places, but what excites me of what we have done in the recent like kind of past is we created the Mayday button. The Mayday button is awesome. I don't know if you've seen that. On your Fire, if you're like kind of stuck, you don't know how the Wi-Fi turns on, and just press that button, and you have an employee sitting there talking to you, seeing your screen, and say, you have to click this one, and you should move. That's super helpful. That's awesome. Like another button, right, like really brain dump here. The IoT button excited me. Like click something, some channel, some message appears, or restock on toilet paper, whatever it is. Kind of the drone delivery system is obviously cool if you're like a little bit nerdy anyhow. But I'm also excited about that we built wind and solar farms, and obviously like kind of the area where I'm working in, like kind of the innovation happening in Amazon Web Service, and there's so much more. Just looking at like a smaller part of the company and Amazon Web Services. In 2015, we launched 722 new services or major features. So that's not the number of deployments. This is meaningful features shipped. And if you look back at the years before, we started in 2011 with 80, and I found that is amazing. In 2012, we had 160 features and services, and so on. So it's growing. And this year, we already surpassed 400 features and services. And our big, like Christmas-like deadline is still approaching, which is the reInvent conference in Las Vegas. So how does that work? You have all these independent teams that are like full force, and all of that needs to align somehow, right? And we're not talking alignment on how do I do that small feature, but like kind of align the whole organization and create ideas and work on a meaningful direction as a group. And besides the teams that are nimble, the whole company is led by 14 Amazon leadership principles. You can look them up. They're easily findable via Google. And they are not just written on paper for the purpose that somebody wrote something on paper and felt good about it. They're lived. I barely have a meeting where there's not a person inside that meeting quoting one of the leadership principles to justify the idea or direction they want to go for. And these leadership principles are like kind of the two I mentioned already, or like kind of that are related to the talk here, are ownership. So the small teams, they do their thing, right? They have an idea, they pitch that idea, they set the goals for that idea, they describe how they define success for their idea, and they work on it, and they own all of it. They're on call. We had the on-call talk. If your team is on call, that being awoken at night for a stupid, non-important reason quickly gets fixed. If you can't say, oh, yeah, I don't know, the others are on call, that kind of stuff. It's not flying. And the other one also mentions customer obsession. So these leadership principles guide us as an organization overall, but then, and that's what I wanted to talk about, is there's these processes around how we create new services and products. And coming from the customer obsession, and what I told you that customers are mainly responsible for our roadmaps, that kind of altogether describes, or kind of from that derived, there's a process we call working backwards. And this is the one I like to share. And the idea is that you start with a mock press release. So if I start a new project or a bigger feature on an existing project, I start a press release. I kind of like one piece of paper, Word document, whatever it is, right? And start, okay, how should that look like? If we're done, like kind of, I don't know how long it takes, a year, 2, 5, I don't care. Like kind of, I write a press release, and I start like kind of, okay, Amazon launches something, something, and so on. And as I can't share the current press releases or the mock press releases, I went to our homepage and had a look at actual press releases that we put out there for stuff we have already released. So they're slightly different, but it works for the purpose of that talk. And I want to go through the press releases to explain what needs to be in such a press release and for what reason. Well, we think makes sense. So obviously you need some kind of heading, right? So that's an example. Amazon Web Services announces Amazon Lobinger, a free cross-platform 3D engine integrated with AWS and Twitch. And if you are the audience for that, you might be excited about this, right? That's the whole idea. So the header obviously needs to name the product, what's going to happen, right? And the subheading needs to describe quickly what is that, right? Kind of I decide based on that whether I should continue to read or not. It should be very concise, the gist of it. Easy. Followed by a summary, and then if you have read more press releases before, it usually starts with like tone, whatever agency put that out, like date, and so on, little legal stuff about what your stock ticker is and all that stuff. And the idea of that summary, you don't need to read that. The idea of the summary is to give an overview of the product and the benefit, and you should assume that the reader will not continue after that paragraph. Right? That's the management abstract. And if you have said it all there, that's the goal, like kind of a very short version. So The idea is if I share that with someone else, right? They can read that in like 2 minutes and say, good luck, I have no idea about this, or you should talk to the other part in the company, I feel they do something similar, or that is interesting, I know someone in the company that is excited about that project, maybe they want to join your team. Like this helps like kind of to get the very short, precise like kind of description of what you're doing. And then you go into more detail, all of that fits on one page. It's a problem describing like where you're coming from. Why is this hard? Why are, in this case, gaming engines hard, complex, I don't know, expensive, all that kind of stuff, not integrated. And you follow up, obviously, with some sort of solution describing how your product elegantly solves the just stated problem. Kind of straightforward so far. Then we have something that might be surprising to a reader of such a document, and we have a quote by one of our leaders. So in this case, it's Mike, Vice President of Amazon Games, and he basically gives a quote around why we are doing this and how that connects, right? And this is important if I write such a document inside my company. I basically get a stakeholder involved, right? I get someone important in my company approve that idea, right? Saying, Mike in this case, giving my headcount, right? He sponsors that project. So that's like kind of a reason why we have that internally, and obviously externally makes sense as well. And then obviously in a press release, you don't want to make people go to Google to find that now. They kind of describe how to get started, where that is, how much it is, right? How does it work? How do I actually, I'm excited about this, how do I start? And you follow up by quote of a customer. You also have that quote of a customer in the mock press release. And you should have, kind of both of the quotes should not be made up. So we talk and they say, not bad, but maybe a little bit different, right? All of kind of before we even write a single line of code, before we have the team set up, kind of we have a customer saying, yep, that sounds good, I would pay that. Or I need that. Right? So customer quote and then call to action, like that's the website that's going to happen. And that works for the technical projects, that works for any projects I mentioned before as well. So if you're interested in movies and excited about Woody Allen, I personally am not, I don't get that guy. But right, kind of you read that headline and say, oh my God, that's exciting, you start reading the press release, and even in that press release, we have a summary about Woody Allen's latest and yet untitled feature film and whatnot. You have the quote from Amazon, I skipped a couple of these now, and where to get started, basically section. So if you read and read multiple of our press releases, you will see this kind of pattern. So heading, subheading, summary, problem, solution, quote by Amazon, how to get started, quote by customer, closing call to action. And most of them is actually just a paragraph. And if you have that, you have a pretty good document. It's one page, it's fast to read, describing what you want to do. And you have a stakeholder in there, and like kind of someone paying you the team. You have maybe talk to a customer that will want it later and so on. It's pretty cool. It's a good start, right? You're not doing something in the open without knowing whether it should be, if it ever will be successful. So like some tips about writing such a press release, take your time and nail it. It takes quite a long time to write a good press release. And that's fine, because the time you invest here, it might be, like for your first press release, it might be 40 hours or 60 hours. Like, that's nothing compared to development time or your designers doing something. Nothing, right? Even on your pay grade. And ignore all the constraints. That's a rule we have. Ignore all constraints means like kind of, if I propose something that includes us buying airplanes, so what? Can I do that? It might be a good idea, and it's worth capturing the idea. And if I can say this is a good thing we should do, we will might do it if we can, right? It also means all technical constraints. So if you start by saying, oh, you know what, given the current technology and me wanting to build the best next chat app, and then you end up somewhere here, right? And what you should do is you should like kind of just ignore that and say, okay, this is where I want to be, right? This is what excites me. This is where I want to get, and then see how to get there. I'll talk about that in a second, how to get there. And if you've written all of that and created this document and shared it and got feedback from your peers and other leaders, and you're not excited about it, just scrap the project, right? Then do the next one, do something else, find a different idea. You need to be excited after reading these documents, and others need to be excited, else it's probably not worth pursuing. So what happens during sharing this document? People will ask you all kinds of questions. Like half of the time easy is people asking questions. First is like kind of, that is awesome. How do you do that? It's pretty much what happens usually, or this is not, right? How do you do that? And in the end, kind of, there's questions. And you should capture them in like kind of the next part of the document. So kind of we're walking backwards right now, right? Like kind of we started with the idea and we're going backwards. So next thing is, can we extend that document with FAQs? And basically that means we add meat to the skeleton we have described, and it includes all the questions that came up during writing the press release, and you probably should group them by like a target audience or whatever stuff makes sense, because it will be a lot of questions. I've seen documents with like hundreds of those. One group could be your customers. What is going to excite me about this? What will disappoint me? How will I discover or find that? How much is it? I'm in a different country, can I use that? I have this kind of subscription model. What happens to that? Do I need to pay more? Do I, like all of these questions that happen, right? You should answer them, because you get more specific over time about what you actually want to build. You describe the vision, and now you go from that vision to something more concrete and actionable. And there might be other questions for like kind of more internal ones, looking at your stakeholders inside the company, in our case, all the small 2 pizza box teams. And someone will ask, like, why is this important right now? How do you know that you're succeeding? What is going to provoke the most debate internally? Like, kind of, how do we get this done? Is there potential for fraud or risk? All these kind of questions you have to answer inside your company. And it gets more and more real over time, and that happens, if you have a good press release, that happens pretty quickly. And then you start talking to your designers, or you kind of open Balsamiq yourself or whatever you have. To say, okay, how does it actually work, right? And this is the step, how you start with a far-fetched idea that can be out in 5 or 10 years, and you make that more real. And we do this process for anything substantial in the company. And substantial for me was like kind of, I wrote a press release around the launch of the team I just founded, right? And so you have, oh, Amazon launches that team with the purpose of, and so on and so on. And in the end, it's a small-scale project. The same documents are written for like a new device, right? Like same kind of document. Works as a process pretty well across all organizations and types of work. Mockups obviously kind of sketch your customer experience, see if that makes sense, if that actually clicks, right? Tip there, keep the fidelity of your mockup to the level that matches your current progress. If you just have the very first ideas, don't overdo it. It's just a waste of time if you go like kind of all glossy and whatnot. And basically tell a story on how a customer uses a product and the service to solve the problem you have described in the press release. And then you're done. Are you? No, you're not. The whole idea about these documents is that it's a living document. So we start working on these projects. And as I said, we started without any constraints. And what we will realize is, oh, there might be some, right? There might be some legal constraints we were not aware of. There might be some technical things we couldn't figure out, whatever. So there might be like kind of external factors or internal factors that slightly move your project, right? There might be something you were not aware before, right? And instead of just like kind of doing what you do to kind of cover that, you should always go back to that document and update the document matching to these constraints or what happened basically during this project, and reread it. Does it still make sense? Is it still an exciting story? Do still the FAQs match up? Does it still make sense to work on that project? go from there. Because in the end, you can keep this artifact around. And with so many new hires, with people moving teams and so on, the first thing for onboarding you can do is to give them the press release and say, okay, this is what we're doing. That's pretty efficient. So the working backwards process is basically, we write a press release, we make that more specific through FAQs, and we start doing mockups. And if you want to learn more about this, use Google, search for Werner, our CTO. He wrote a blog post about that in 2006. And with this keyword and additional links, you will find more material around this. Or just talk to me during the next break. After the next break, I'm sadly done, and I need to catch my flight. But there's some time in the next break to find me and ask me questions around this. And I think I got some time back. Thank you very much.